Recording.
Innovations in Global Mobility Programming, Rethinking Healthcare Human Resources in Brazil, presented by Leigh Hause, Amberton University Graduate School of Management, August 2016. Purpose of the project: innovative treatments, improvement in healthcare delivery systems, and the ability to bring solutions across national borders offer solutions for countries struggling with the healthcare crisis. Brazil is home to 1/5 of the world's population. The Brazilian healthcare system is one of the largest in the world. If the Brazilian healthcare system were to fail, the consequences would be felt worldwide. An economy in recession and the cost of the Zika crisis leave Brazil at risk to not meet the medical care needs of its citizens. Crisis brings opportunity to invest in new healthcare technologies. Foreign investments require a global mobility program that works to start new programs in the country. What is globalization? Globalization is a process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments of different nations, a process driven by international trade and investment and aided by information technology. Globalization includes the following external factors: global culture, global politics and in-country laws, global economics, global natural environment resources, global technology, and global business and industry demands and trends. The external environment includes changes that are fast in pace, can be sporadic, and interrupted or stopped by various factors, war or natural disaster. Globalization is the sum of growing and dynamic forces that result from our interconnectedness across a number of external factors, and this impacts global human resource management. Global HRM requires a broader scale of expertise, flexibility to adapt to in-country HRM functions, a shift in focus on the level of involvement with local personnel and HRM staff itself that can speak the local language and can adeptly navigate cultural norms. Just because management staff speaks the local language does not mean that an employee's cultural needs will be met. In-country culture is experienced in every facet of society, from how to dress, access to healthcare, behavior between men and women in public, to what foods are available to eat, and when you're trying to attract, obtain, and develop a local workforce, the impact of cultural constructs must be considered. Global technology is an external environmental factor that impacts global HRM. Over the last 2 decades, there's been a vast expansion and ease of use of technology across the global workplace. Technology has allowed for much smaller and independent organizations to enter the global stage. Improvements in technology allows for the sharing of communication across national boundaries, and this has triggered a demand for global markets and goods. This, in turn, has driven increased competition for customers that does not stop at the border of a nation. Technology allows for the organization to be and reach anywhere, not tied to one location. Global economics is an external environmental factor that impacts global HRM. Though the amount of international trade overall has not necessarily increased dramatically in the past century, who is driving the demand and supplying it has. In the past decade, there has been a significant shifting of U.S. global companies to move their headquarters overseas. Also, global economics has changed migration patterns of workers, and developing countries such as China and India are receiving a great influx of workers, and 3/4 of the millions of migrating workforce are winding up in a small percentage of the top developed countries. The migration pattern is qualitatively changing in that women make up approximately 50% of the population, and that today's migrant worker is more likely to be highly skilled. Global politics and laws also impact global HRM. A global organization must consider the current political environment, as not all political systems are alike. Some countries allow for significant input by citizens, such as in democratic societies, whereas totalitarian societies or societies where the political system is headed by a religious leader do not want to hear from their citizens. The Governmental power alignment can greatly impact what type of organization would be allowed in the country and run by whom. The political climate is intimately intertwined with the international financial and banking systems. Courting business in one country may require alliances across several countries. The behavior of global HRM needs to be consistent with local laws and political systems. Some countries may extend a global HRM greater flexibility in handling employees. Other countries may have strict guidelines. It is impossible to separate the interactions between the various external factors and is best understood as a constantly evolving landscape to be navigated through. The globalization of healthcare began with the World Health Organization, founded on April 7, 1948. The World Health Organization is a non-governmental international organization that was developed by the United Nations. Though the organization has undergone many transitions, the base mission remains the same: to provide global health care. The most widely recognized action of the World Health Organization, past and present, is to bring vaccinations to the most vulnerable, with the primary goal to contain, reduce, and eradicate known killers such as smallpox and polio. The World Health Organization employs 7,000 people working in 150 country offices with 6 regional sites. The World Health Organization's multilingual website, publications, and other resources ensure that health information reaches the people who need it in the languages they can understand. This makes access to health information more equitable and effective, and it is a good basic model of global mobility in healthcare programming. The cost of global healthcare. The healthcare industry is in the midst of a turbulent global transformation. Healthcare reform and fiscal restraint are front and center on the minds of politicians, the media, and business leaders around the world. As the global healthcare industry grapples with an unsustainable cost trajectory, it is also facing increased demands for healthcare services by an expanding pool of consumer patients and by growth in costly chronic disease management. Global healthcare costs, currently estimated at $6 trillion to $7 trillion, are projected to reach more than $12 trillion within just 7 years. Given this outlook, radical measures are expected to be taken to control this spiraling expense. In the United States, healthcare expenses now represent 17% of gross domestic product. And amidst a modest economic recovery, healthcare costs are expanding at twice the country's economic growth rate. The global phenomenon, regardless of payer system, is that the pool of available capital to pay for healthcare is either decreasing or staying flat while costs are rising. The pharmaceutical sector, where overall revenue is expected to remain flat or decline over the next 10 years, is a reflection of this new reality. Despite the economic indicators, innovation and digital transformation may offer solid solutions for increasing the quality of healthcare while containing costs, but only if executed properly. Additional competitors from outside the traditional healthcare sphere, including many from the technology sector, are seeking to enter the healthcare market. These competitors are not only eager to capture some of the healthcare revenue, but they are familiar with operating in an endless cycle of aggressive competition, product development, and innovation. They are also accustomed to functioning in an environment where companies can be completely disintermediated from consumers in a matter of months. This constant state of reinvention and transformation is a relatively recent one for healthcare, but it's one that's here to stay. New global trends in healthcare, innovation. Global healthcare will be fueled by activity around innovation, mergers, acquisitions, and new geographic markets. Integration of medicine and healthcare, digitally accelerated. The pharmaceutical industry, healthcare providers, and regulatory bodies historically have led almost separate but parallel lives. Pharmaceutical companies previously concentrated on launching blockbuster drugs, while healthcare providers focused their energy on providing patient care. Today, these ecosystems are converging, and the goal is collaboration. The solution lies within the supplier-customer relationship. Large-scale data analysis in which clinical data and claims data can be integrated for the entire patient populations also can change the value proposition of healthcare. This analysis will allow providers to determine the sickest patients and will enable real-world analysis about the effectiveness of certain medications on entire patient populations. On the consumer side, the digitalization of healthcare will be powerful. This will manifest itself in new tools for physicians and consumers to communicate with each other outside of doctors' offices. Through social media platforms and rating sites, consumers effectively will drive costs down by sharing experiences regarding fees and quality of physicians, hospitals, and procedures. Redefinition of market access. The demand for value, combined with increased regulatory hurdles and intensified requirements for clinical relevance, has shifted the emphasis from development of approvable drugs to approvable and reimbursable drugs. Patients the center. Both the downward pressure on pricing through restricted healthcare budgets and the requirement to demonstrate cost effectiveness are driving significantly different purchasing behaviors within the industry. Patient and their health management issues will take center stage in this evolving process. And the commercial model is evolving away from the direct sales force model towards one where multidisciplinary teams will educate and influence a broader set of stakeholders, including key opinion leaders, payers, hospitals, and group purchasing organizations. It is important to recognize the four categories of multinational enterprise structures in order to understand the complexity of global HRM and the reasons why a global mobility program is a must for many companies that have overseas employees. The multinational organization is one that the parent company is owned by country nationals within two or more countries. Because multinational organizations are decentralized and nationally self-sufficient, coordination across national sites becomes challenging. The roles of overseas operations has a heavy focus on identifying and capitalizing upon local opportunities. Each national location develops and retains its own knowledge. Global organizations are centrally and globally scaled. A global organization has each location implement the parent company's strategies. The knowledge within the organization is centralized, both developed and retained that way. In a global organization, the branding of and the products offered would remain the same location to location. The theme of strategy in the global organization is efficiency and how to balance between internal consistency and global integration. In the international organization, the core values and competencies are centralized, other functions are decentralized. Overseas operations are to adapt and leverage parent company competencies. The international organization develops knowledge at its center and disseminates the knowledge out to its overseas partners. In a transnational organization, knowledge is built and shared globally. The structure of the transnational organization is independent and specified. The strategic focus of the transnational organization is flexibility to balance consistency and local integration across a wide variety of dimensions. Additionally, different layers and functions of managers are required to coordinate across business dimensions. Global HRM structure must acknowledge the pressures of organizational consistency. Many companies who have had success in the parent company struggle with replicating successful strategies site to site. However, organizations with overseas sites cannot ignore the pressures to conform to external pressures by the local culture, laws, values, and customs. What is a global mobility program? In order to compete and thrive in a complex and ever-changing global environment, an organization has to develop an effective business strategy to compete globally and ensure that the strategy is flexible and can change in response to the needs of specific countries and market conditions. A multidimensional approach is a necessity. A one-size-fits-all approach is a poor strategy to approach global talent management. All international companies, regardless of size, structure, and industry, have to face the realities of managing global talent. The availability of talent is not consistent worldwide. nor is it consistent industry to industry. Competent global leadership is a critical needs area and includes senior management development as well as the development of an international management team. All organizations have to establish an effective global talent management system. An effective global mobility program has to consider the internal assignments that need to be filled, ranging from traditional expatriate assignments with a focus on career growth to project management work with varying lengths of overseas travels and stays, to startup or site opening teams, reverse assignments, and many other types of assignments. Most companies will have a set of policies and procedures that govern the most typical global mobility programs, such as of expatriates. But those types of contracts may not be remotely sufficient to address career growth, adequate compensation, and tax oversight. Additionally, there are generational trends that may be a barrier to utilizing traditional expatriate models to fill talent overseas, and a global mobility program must recognize who is today's workforce, what they want, what motivates them, and what new skills and talents do they possess. Also, there is a growing pool of migrant employees who already have some level of international experience. A strong global mobility program must be flexible and have the ability to customize the human resource component to match the variety of assignments. Global mobility can also mean staying put and utilizing virtual teams to span geography, meaning that the global mobility program itself must include a strong technological platform that allows for live-time communication regardless of time zone. Equally important, global mobility has to be responsive to the increasingly complex structure of global organizations. The importance of adjustment to foreign cultures cannot be understated. Employees or employees with families who cannot tolerate a new culture, are intolerant of differences, and or who cannot adapt effectively are much more likely to terminate assignments early, engage in behaviors outside of local norms, creating tension. The successful global mobility program helps employees adjust ahead of time by providing opportunities to transition overseas without having to immediately report to work, adding benefit structures that support a family maintaining quality lifestyle, housing, access to healthcare, schools, linking employees to other expatriates that can help local adjustment. Strong global mobility programming includes recognition that there is a true adjustment period moving from the honeymoon phase to cultural shock to adjustment and then mastery. Helping employees at each stage is critical. There are 4 separate work role types that may require global assignment: strategic opportunity, commodity job, learning experience, and skilled management or technical position. A strong global mobility program recognizes the different types of staff are needed for assignments and that the assignments themselves may not require traditional expatriate types of deployments. Additionally, the types of overseas jobs has to take into consideration of geographic and role demands. Jobs have to be strategically aligned to fit the organizational needs. The discussion of global staffing often includes the position of expatriates filling strategic management roles. Expatriates serve 3 basic functions: to fill open positions for career development and organizational development. Expatriates serve as both corporate knowledge experts and technological experts. Expatriates offer organizational development with on-site coordination of business functions, but it also allows for expatriates to become a part of informal communication site to site and socialization of organization culture. Since expatriates are housed in country, they are part of the local site and bring with them lifetime understanding and expertise of U.S.-based cultural values, understanding of U.S. laws and business ethics, and can be utilized to bring U.S.-based HRM policies and procedures with them. Expatriates serve 2 important roles: agents of control and boundary spanners. As an agent of control, the expatriate can influence others directly and indirectly. Expatriates serve as boundary spanners, and this includes the flow of communication from the host country or foreign subsidiary back to the parent site. The expatriate becomes a bicultural leader and national advocate, building key relationships with strategic units. Most companies have an expatriation program, but few companies have a repatriation program. Most companies do not fund this because they do not see a financial value. Being gone from your home between 2 and 5 years can produce quite a shock because things can change tremendously. This can be very difficult for an employee or employee's family to manage, on top of their own personal concerns about work role changes, the need to address changes in compensation, and status changes in career concerns. It is important to understand that repatriation is a process that typically takes 6 months to set up via HRM and includes many, many variables. Support practices go hand in hand with the adjustment to change in culture, work, and family roles. Best practices do exist on how to handle career support, where to find help in finding and adjusting to post-assignment positions, and repatriation support. Communication is a key piece of any global mobility support program. An organized, comprehensive approach to global mobility is essential. By nature, global mobility programs are expensive, often resulting in labor costs 2 or 3 times the cost of domestic employment. The result of an unfocused and piecemeal approach is an upward spiral in employer-wide international business travel costs and expenses. A proactive framework for deploying and maintaining global resources is a must. All too often, individuals, corporate departments deal with global mobility issues on an ad hoc basis and without consideration, even where interdepartment issues are common. Employment laws, immigration, and personal tax issues often track independently from each other. For both efficiency and effectiveness perspectives, employers should consider a global mobility policy which integrates HR, taxes, travel, payroll, finance, immigration, and accounting considerations. Critical to developing a managed mobility mobile policy is first to do an accounting, not only identify the departments involved from a control and budgetary perspective, but also the workforce currently or historically deployed by creating a database that identifies the employees who have been deployed, track their location, duration of assignment, business functions, compensation, benefits, as well as the effectiveness of the assignment. Capturing all of these factors would permit the employer to examine whether incentives being provided around the world are in line with the company's business plan and they are actually producing results. Immigration requirements necessitate globally mobile employees to have proper visas and work permits. Immigration should not be a standalone issue, but must be closely integrated with tax and international employment law. Immigration issues are seldom subject to instant resolution. Visa violations can result in government audits, penalties, and limits on the employer's ability to deploy employees where and when needed. In designing an integrated immigration approach, corporations need to examine tax treaties between the host countries and countries in which corporate employees are working in order to determine the tax exemption requirements. Further, the corporation must develop a method of accounting for such costs and charges, necessitating a system for tracking the travel of its global workforce. Tax compliance considerations will require employers to develop administrative processes for tracking the travel of its employees. In the absence of tax treaties or totalization agreements, the employee and employer may be liable for income tax and social taxes in more than one country. For example, a U.S. citizen is subject to U.S. tax regardless of where the employee performs services or is paid, and in absence of a treaty, totalization agreement, or solution under U.S. tax code may be taxed both at home and in home countries. Documentation is necessary to determine if benefits are subject to favorable tax treatment. This is important also for repatriation considerations as well. There are multiple legal issues with global mobility. They include legal enforceability of employment agreements in foreign countries, the application of U.S. Foreign Corruption Practices Act with respect to U.S. citizens working abroad. This may require corporations to review their corporate policies on corruption issues and increase oversight and training, as well as indemnification provisions. Often, the employer will establish a legal entity such as a corporation in the host country for the purpose of employing its assignees. It is also common to engage a professional employer organization, PEO, in a favorable tax jurisdiction to handle the benefits and tax aspects. In this situation, however, care must be taken to make clear who actually employs the assignees, the employer or the PEO. Otherwise, worker classification issues may arise. The manner in which the employee abroad will be paid is also important. An employer may be required by the host country's law to pay the employee in local currency or by use of local payroll. It is important to check whether the host jurisdiction will allow a shadow payroll or a split payroll. U.S. employers must keep in mind that its U.S. benefit programs may not provide the same tax advantage or benefits for an employee working outside of the U.S. Normally, the time to consider changing an employee's benefit package is prior to initiating any type of transfer. Benefits of global mobility programming. Traditional global mobility programs sought to create a positive experience for their assignees and their families. A comprehensive approach balances the need for employee-family support while also reflecting the changing needs of business. This can result in a wide range of benefits, reduces costs, delivers the appropriate level of benefits and supports for each assignment, uses methods and tools that are efficient and repeatable, improves visibility to costs, develops talent, makes talent development a top priority, helps develop leaders with global experience, fits the need of business, offers flexible options to address a wide range of needs. Business benefits from effective global mobility. It improves ROI. Returning employees into positions that capitalize on their new skills, experience, improving retention and business value, reduces the risk of non-compliance, facilitates a rigorous and consistent approach to complying with rules and regulations at every level, supports global growth, gets the right resources in place quickly and effectively, handles a high volume of global mobility assignments. Brazil quick facts. Portuguese is the official language. There is no official religion, though many identify themselves as Catholic. Brazil is home to 1/5 of the world's population. Population growth is a little over 1%. The Brazilian Constitution guarantees education for every citizen. School is mandatory for children ages 7 to 17. Its governmental structure is a multi-party republic. There are 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The members of the executive and legislative branches are directly elected, while the members of the judicial branches are appointed after passing an exam. The 4 main political parties are the Workers' Party, Brazilian Social Democracy Party, Brazilian Democracy Movement Party, and the Democrats. Brazil, quick facts continued. Recent political turmoil. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff has been suspended from office pending an impeachment trial over accusations that she illegally manipulated government accounts, which she denies. The massive corruption investigations are creating a rift between political parties and have created a larger sense that the government is corrupt and there is a general mistrust. Transportation in Brazil. As of 2010, there are almost 2 million kilometers of roads in Brazil. Of the approximate 2 million kilometers of roads, only about 200,000 kilometers of roads are actually paved. Another important form of transportation is freight and waterway transportation. In total, there are 36 deep water ports. The usage of railways and trains has decreased over the years, and some railways have been shut down. Lastly, there are approximately 2,500 airports in Brazil, which gives it the second highest number of airports behind the United States. Brazil has the largest economy in all of Latin America and the 7th largest economy in the world. In 2016, according to the International Monetary Fund, the gross domestic product per capita is $12,528, which ranks 77th in the world. Brazil has the 6th largest workforce in the world, totaling 107 million workers. Some of the major sectors of the economy include agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and service. Brazil's economy is going through its worst recession in more than 3 decades, following a drop in prices for Brazilian commodities such as oil, iron ore, and soya. In 2015, the economy shrank by 3.8%, its worst annual performance since 1981. Inflation reached 10.7%, and at the end of last year, a 12-year high. Unemployment increased to 9% in 2015 and increased to 11.2% in the end of April 2016. Brazil is the lone country in South America whose primary language is Portuguese. It's a very simple yet powerful challenge for organizations looking to communicate and engage multiple markets in Latin America. Brazil has a unique history. It is important to understand how much the country has evolved. Its rapid advancement in recent years has led to a vocal middle class. Brazil is an incredibly diverse country. Brazil is a cultural melting pot, and the country is almost a region in and of itself. The country is vast and geographically varied, with thousands of miles of beaches, an enormous Amazon rainforest, and some of the world's largest and most important urban centers, as well as some of the most rural parts of the world. On the global stage, Brazil stands out among its Latin American peers. Among this group, it will be the first South American country to host the Summer Olympics. It is the only South American country among the BRICS emerging economies, and it is the country with the largest GDP in Latin America, and it is the country with the largest population. Cultural differences between Brazil and the United States. Work life. Brazilians do business with people, Americans with companies. Dress code in Brazil is an indicator of status and success, so dress well. Corporate Brazil is more hierarchical than in the U.S. Group work in Brazil involves everyone, while in America the work is split among teams. Brazilians pay attention to etiquette and protocol. Americans are more casual and laid back. Brazilians work to live. Americans live to work. The concept of time dramatically differs from country to country. Immigration. In order to have a remunerated job in Brazil, you will need both a residence permit, either temporary or permanent, and a work visa. This first step is made by your future employer in Brazil, who will apply for a work permit at the Brazilian Ministry of Labor and Employment by submitting the work contract and a set of other documents. After the application is allowed by the ministry, you will have to apply for a work visa at a Brazilian embassy or consulate in your home country. In order to apply for a work permit, your future employer will have to submit your CV, certificates, and documents stating your education and work experience, and a certified copy of your passport. The submission of further documents will depend on the type of work visa you will be applying for. All these documents to be approved by the Brazilian authorities have to be translated into Portuguese and certified before being submitted. The approval will then be sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who will authorize the responsible Brazilian embassy or consulate in your home country to start the work visa procedure. Usually foreign employees will obtain temporary work visa, which will initially be issued for 2 years. An extension for another 2 years can be requested no later than 30 days before the visa's expiration. Work visas and work permits are usually only issued to foreigners whose future employer is a registered Brazilian company. However, there are various and quite confusing exclusions and separate treatments to this. A permanent work visa will usually be assigned to foreigners who are entitled to permanent residence in Brazil. Normally, this applies to professional researchers or scientists, or investors, managers, or directors. There are special exit and entry requirements for dual nationals as well as for children. Crime in Brazil is a serious consideration. Brazilian police and media report that violent crime rate remains high in most urban centers. Credit card fraud, ATM scams are endemic in Brazil. Visitors work closely with their financial institutions to monitor their accounts regularly. Handicap accessibility is limited. There are other immigration considerations such as health risks, electrical blackouts in urban areas. Also, for foreign employees working in Brazil, Brazil will not pay medical bills of non-citizens. Be aware that U.S. Medicare does not apply overseas. Cultural orientation. The Brazilian culture is very friendly and foreigners are embraced. However, the Brazilian Constitution is clear about immigration processes and the pathways to Brazilian citizenship and residency. Family is the primary social structure, nepotism is common in business, and the family is the single most important factor in the formation of Brazilian society. Manners, formality of business dress, making appointments in advance, hosting meals as a part of relationship building in business are all expected. Business partners are addressed by appropriate titles, Mr. and Mrs. Doctor. Business relationships need to be cultivated and maintained and are expected to be long-term. Patience is key in business negotiations. There are segregated groups of Germans, Japanese, Haitians, and Middle Easterners who have immigrated to Brazil and they're accepted, but they have kept their own language, culture, and value systems. Poverty and crime have created some segregation in social-economic class, and the living conditions in the favelas, upper-middle-class neighborhoods, and the countryside are distinctly different. Brazilians are enthusiastic soccer fans and enjoy discussing local sports. Political discussions are off limits in business. As of 1988, the Brazilian Constitution guarantees that legal citizens in Brazil have the right to access medical care and coverage. As a result, there is a public national health system provided by the government. This coverage includes free doctor's visits, prescription drugs, hospitalization, and even surgeries. Brazil has a private system as well. People can choose to use the private system if they want, but it is not free. Private healthcare providers can receive subsidies from the government to help lower costs for the patient. Also, even if you have a private health plan and you wish to use the public system, you can still use the resources and services of the public system to cover medications, cancer treatments, and organ transplants. The private system is generally better than the public system with shorter waits and better care. The more affluent Brazilians generally use the system, which covers about 20% of the Brazilian population. There are several hundred firms offering 4 principal types of medical plans: private health insurance, prepaid group practice, medical cooperatives, and company health plans. The public health care system on paper is beautiful. In reality, there are many gaps in care due to funding, waste, and disorganization. The lack of funding impacts basic items needed for healthcare, such as clothes and running water to the clinics. Simple antibiotics, medications for hypertension, medications for worms, and wound care are free, but there are some months that the funding cannot cover all needed medical supplies. Primary care for chronic disease is not fully funded, and this creates disease exacerbation, resulting in tertiary care in the hospital setting. The system is underfunded, but it does help those who would not otherwise be able to afford care. The primary country care includes education by nurses at the public schools about washing hands, disease care, and trying to build sanitary conditions across the countryside. Currently, Brazil is in the process of building urgent care secondary hospitals as the public hospitals are significantly overcrowded. The growth of urgent care centers is occurring across the country currently. Brazil has the 5th largest population on Earth with 206 million people and the 7th largest GDP with USD 2 trillion. In spite of the current economic crisis, it still figures as a regional power and is definitely a player which cannot be ignored in the global healthcare sector. Brazil also has one of the biggest public healthcare systems in the world, covering approximately 150 million people. Brazil spends 9.7% of its GDP on health. The spending is split 46% in the public health system, which covers about 75% of the population, and it spends 54% in the private healthcare system, which covers 25.9% of the population. The Brazilian health system is underfinanced, though the public investment has been growing quickly. It has increased 260% from 2003 to 2012. In spite of these impressive numbers, there is growing pent-up demand on the sector for several reasons. One of them is the common problem of poor administration of resources and corruption that tends to affect public services in Brazil, but other factors play an important role too. Brazil has been through a major social, economic transportation in the past decade that has resulted in the impressive growth of consumer power. Access to better healthcare services is one of the main aspirations of the vocal middle class. The recent social economic transportation was also mirrored by a strong epidemiological change in Brazil, especially seen with the increase of life expectancy and an aging population. These factors bring new pressures on the Brazilian healthcare system, which are at a critical inflection point from both a funding and infrastructure perspective. Global mobility is a costly venture. The socio-political, cultural, and environmental factors are complex, and time must be spent in country to become well-versed in the Brazilian way of life and business behavior. A combination of strategies and perhaps a more fluid progression allowing relationships and a comfort level to build, such as reverse immigration to provide training and to establish a close working team, then transitions to a viable set of virtual teams is a possible example. However, business relationships, especially long-term business relationships, are important in Brazil, so the investment of staff must include those who have the willingness and the skill set to cultivate long-term relationships with respect to local culture. Additionally, staff that have a strong cultural understanding of Brazil and can speak Portuguese fluently are the strongest asset. It is important to understand that in Brazil, the numbers of expatriates from the United States living and working in Brazil are modest. Brazil is an immense country, and immigration for business is very much regionalized, such as in São Paulo, which is the major financial center in Brazil. Technology allows for lifetime contact across time zones and can reach remote communities in Brazil. Technology can help to mitigate only some of the barriers to expatriation, such as immigration delays, high cost of living, safety and security for assignees, complex laws and regulations are all factors to be considered in establishing a global mobility program. Brazil's healthcare system is underfunded and relatively young, with serious gaps in care, structural gaps, difficulty paying for quality doctors. As the economic recession of Brazil continues and the socio-political and environmental constraints continue, coupled with the emerging health threat of Zika, there is a vast opportunity to invest in all aspects of the Brazilian healthcare system, from pharmacy to building critical care facilities to reducing waste. Education, training, strong leadership, and oversight of funding are going to be key positions that are needed to be filled overseas. Conclusions. Global mobility programming that launches employees into Brazil's healthcare system starts with a detailed strategic plan, and given the unique socio-political climate of Brazil, a traditional expatriate model may not be the most cost-effective choice. The option of reverse immigration for training of emerging leaders, the use of virtual teams, and temporary/project-focused assignments where staff are overseas for 2 weeks up to 3 months, all may be a better investment of time and money. The sheer numbers of those who need access to health, with the budgetary and on-site physical limitations found in Brazil, is creating a market and a demand for virtual and telephonic supportive health. New technology in healthcare allows for telehealth opportunities to reach remote communities or to access those who are otherwise homebound. Brazil is in the process of trying to adopt more cost-effective healthcare strategies, and companies who can maximize value and increase volume of patient care are those who will continue to make inroads to Brazil. Additionally, with the Zika crisis, hotspot medical teams who can evac in and out of regions and access local needs are actively in use. Also, the upper middle class in Brazil is demanding concierge medical care within the private insurance sector, and this is putting pressure on the government to change how coverage is paid for. Recommendations. The offering of private health care is something that organizations are offering to employees to get them to work in Brazil. For many, this is a positive enticement. However, the private healthcare system has serious gaps in care and have generated a number of lawsuits against the Brazilian government to pay for those gaps in care. There are serious regulatory prohibitions that disrupt appropriate coverage under the private sector, whereas the public sector is underfunded and cannot carry the healthcare costs of so many people, many of whom have chronic health conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, and asthma. The companies looking to invest are the large pharmaceutical corporations, but current studies do not focus on the small or mid-sized multinational organizations who are pursuing relationships in Brazil. Also, non-governmental aid agencies such as the Catholic Church or the World Health Organization are providing support lifetime, and their staffing and leadership models should be looked at as possible models to follow for corporate and governmental organizations that want to establish a global mobility program into Brazil. Brazil needs funding to close significant healthcare system infrastructure gaps, and bringing in external organizational partners is a must. Further studies are needed to assess the regulatory changes that are needed to reduce the waste, corruption, and bureaucracy that impede the current healthcare infrastructure. There are clear practical applications for global mobility programming. Brazil is a vibrant country with a unique and rich cultural heritage. Brazil's fight to host the 2016 Summer Olympics, despite a variety of odds, demonstrates the country's strength and ingenuity even in a recession. Global mobility programming is already in Brazil, and those programs that creatively balance organizational need with local culture will generate long-standing working relationships.
References. Other resources.